guys, welcome to day 6 of our alignment lab. I hope that you are learning a lot or just deepening your practice. Today we're going to focus on Warrior 2 and Reverse Warrior. So this is our first time getting into a open hip pose. Up until now, everything that we have been working on is closed hip. So definitely give yourself a little bit of time to open up through your hip flexors before you get started. Whatever you need to do, maybe a Baddha Konasana or a Supta Baddha Konasana, a horse squat or Skandasana, maybe even a floor frog. And then when you're ready, let's get started. We'll begin standing with the hands on the hips. So find your mountain pose as we've been working on. That still applies in our open hip postures. And we're going to take our feet to about shoulder width distance apart. So coming to a wide stance, bringing the feet to a 45-degree angle, heels in, toes out, and then just take a moment to sit low and find your horse squat. Maybe you need a little bit of time to sway the hips from side to side. And then when you're ready, just start to settle in. So as we move into our Warrior 2, there's a ton of stuff happening with the lower body as well as the upper body. I'm going to start by talking about our feet. So you want your ankle, your knee, and your hip to be moving in the same direction. When our hip and our ankle are doing something different than what the knee is doing, that's when you start to feel strain or when we begin to build tenderness or injury over time on the knee. So think about here, your knee tracking over the toes. So we're pressing the inner thighs back. Finding our mountain, we're drawing the tailbone down so it's long and tucking it underneath us. We're keeping our ribs closed and pulling back and our shoulders soft. And then the reason that I like to get into our Warrior 2 from a horse squat is for that reason. We want to keep the hip and the knee and our ankle joint all in the same direction. So keeping the front leg where it is, we'll begin to extend the back leg. Now take a moment if you need to, maybe you lengthen the stance. Notice what happens with the hips, right? So they should stay exactly where they were at when you were in your horse squat, so you can come in and out of that a couple times. Now, we're still pressing our knee towards the pinky edge of the foot, but try not to press so much that you feel your back hip start to come forward. We're still pressing the back hip behind us so that our hips point forward and stay level. And then track that knee towards the pinky edge of the foot, but not so much that you're messing now with the alignment of the pelvis. So we'll do that a couple more times. Come back through your neutral horse pose, and then lengthen the back leg, trying to keep the pelvis still. Now when you're ready, we'll settle into our Warrior 2 with the back leg extended. Same thing on the back leg. You want your hip, your knee, and your ankle to be moving in the same direction. So if it feels better for you, you can draw your toes slightly in, not quite to a 45-degree angle. That's moving more into our Warrior 1 in a closed hip posture, but just a little bit, and that will take some pull off of your back hip. Now it's just an option. It's not mandatory. It just depends on your anatomy and how your body is built. All right. We'll straighten the front leg. Let's get out of that lunge for a moment. Maybe sway the hips back and forth. Bend and straighten the knee. And then come back into your Warrior 2 when you're ready, and we'll start to talk about the upper body. So resetting, knees tracking back. Your back hip is pressing behind you. Pressing into the tripod of both of our feet, finding that Pada Bandha. So make sure that your toes aren't curling and grabbing onto the ground. Your toes are loose. You're pressing into the big toe ball mound, the pinky toe ball mound, and the heel. Both feet equally. So we're not dumping into the front leg. Now we can remove the hands from the hips and tee out your arms. The length of your stance should be about the length of the palm. So your front foot will be underneath the front palm and your back foot will be underneath the back palm. Our shoulders are softened down and they're still stacked directly over the hips. So notice again, as you continue to press your knee towards the pinky edge of the foot, if you feel your torso starting to shift, we want to press the hip and the shoulder back to keep our torso level. Take the hands back to the hips, straighten the leg. Let's come through a Prasarita for a moment before we get into the second side. All toes point forward and hinging from the hips. Let's get a little bit of stretch through the back of the legs. Maybe bend and straighten through the knees. And then we'll slowly rise. Feet shoulder width distance apart, heels and toes out. A couple of times if you'd like to. Sit into your horse squat and straighten the legs. And then when you're ready, settle in. Knees tracking towards the toes. So remember, we want the hip joint, the knee joint, and the ankle joint to be doing the same thing. We'll keep the back leg this time bent and straighten the front leg. So notice here what's happening with that front leg rather. If you notice your knee is feeling a little bit uncomfortable, see if you can track your toes a little bit closer towards midline and notice how that feels on the hip and the knee joint. Staying low in the lunge in the front or back leg, knee stays over the ankle, and we're tracking the pinky toward the knee towards the pinky edge of the foot. Now, if you're pressing that knee back and you feel your back hip start to come forward, take a little bit of the press out of the knee and press into the hip. Teeing out the arms. Maybe you continue to gaze forward, or maybe you start to gaze over the finger. Now notice as you start to gaze forward, if your torso begins to follow. That's moving into a different posture. So look forward, shoulders over the hips, and then only moving the neck, gaze over your hand. Bring the hands back to the hips, straighten the back leg, rotate the foot. We'll take a second set prasarita to release that. Bending and straightening in the knees if you need to. And rise when you're ready. Toe heel the feet back together to touch. We'll take a moment in a tiny ball pose to counter all that opening in the hips. Lift your heels, bend the knees. Squeeze your inner thighs towards one another. This should be a nice counter pose for your open hip postures. Just holding for a couple of rounds of breath. And then release your heels and rise. So again, the reason I like to get into our warrior two from a horse squat is because that's the natural rotation. It's showing you your hip, your knee, and your ankle alignment so that when you play with just moving the leg, you can keep your upper body quiet so you can focus on the foundation of the pose. So I'll guide you into your warrior two from a more traditional standpoint. I'm going to turn to the side, back foot steps forward, front foot steps back, and we're going to find the lunge in our front knee. So lengthen your stance as much as you need to. We're closing the hips now, working into our crescent lunge, a little bit of bend in the back knee. Tuck the tailbone underneath you, belly draws in and back, and shoulders soften down. Keep the hands on your hips. I want you to feel what's happening with the pelvis. We're going to start to open up, spinning the back leg to the short edge of the mat. Same thing here. Notice my torso here is pointed forward. So for me, I know that my foot, or my ankle rather, is not in the correct alignment for this pose. So I'm going to rotate my toes slightly forward like I did in that horse. I'm still tracking the knee back, and then I can focus on pressing my back hip towards the wall behind me. Sitting a little bit lower in the lunge. Now we can start to refine the pose. See if you can stack the knee directly over the ankle, working your hamstring parallel to the ground. Our core is staying tight and engaged. We'll tee out the arms. Another thing I like to cue a lot here in my classes is your hands at your heart. This will help you find the alignment of your torso in your warrior two. So head over ribs, ribs over the pelvic bowl. Track your nose in line with the fingertips, in line with the belly button. Think of one long line. I know we're holding this for a long time. Please feel free to come out of it if you need to. And then when you're ready, straighten your front leg. We'll switch it out. We're going to come all the way to a closed hip posture, rotating over the back leg now, coming into our lunge. So closing the hips, micro bend in your extended leg. Find mountain pose first if you need to lengthen the stance. Notice as you move here what happens to the back leg. Slowly start to open up into your warrior two. Now notice where your torso is. So mine again is kind of creeping towards my thigh. I'm going to take my foot to that slight angle, coming more into a horse squat in my leg so that my hip, my knee, and my ankle are all facing the same direction. Same thing with the back leg. Find that alignment that feels right to you. Maybe you're slightly drawing the toes in. Belly draws back, shoulders are soft. Tee out the arms. Maybe the gaze comes forward. Notice if the gaze comes forward, if your torso starts to follow, you're moving into a different pose. So try to keep the shoulders over the hips, just moving the neck. Maybe bring the hands to your heart so you can find that alignment of nose to belly. Nice job, you guys. Hold for a couple rounds of breath. When you're ready, begin to come out of the pose. We're going to take the hands back to the hips, rotating all 10 of your toes to point forward, and just gently start to toe heel the feet back together. If you need another closed hip posture, you can take a chair or a tiny ball, maybe an embryo pose, coming all the way down to the floor, to the mat for a moment. And now we're gonna add in our reverse warrior. When you're ready, meet me standing again. I'm going to move into this from horse squat, as that's how I like to align my body. If that works for you, feel free to come along with me or move into it in a fashion that feels more comfortable to you. So drawing the feet under the shoulders are just a little bit wider, heels and toes out, sit down into your horse. Keeping the hands on the hips, I want you to feel your pelvis. Notice what happens as you begin to move the legs. Your front leg will stay as is, back leg extends behind you. Now take a moment to set up your foundation, set up your feet, set up the knees, set up the hips. Then we'll talk about our torso, keeping your shoulders stacked directly over the hip. Your belly is engaged. We'll tee out the arms. So we're gonna move into our reverse warrior now. Little to no weight in the back hand, let it rest lightly on the thigh for now. We're gonna reach the front hand, flip your palm up towards the sky, and then reach it up and over. Now, same thing here. You wanna keep your hips and your shoulders stacked. This is a side body stretch rather than a back bend. So again, a lot of times if the alignment on our legs is incorrect or unstable, you'll notice that the torso is hinging forward to the inner thigh. And as you start to move into your reverse warrior, you're creating a back bend rather than a side body stretch. So if that's happening to you, I recommend coming out and then resetting. So think about your knees tracking over the ankle, press the thighs back, right? Tucking the tailbone underneath you. Hip stays in line with the knee, in line with your ankle. Keep the front leg as it is, extend your back leg. If you need to, find that little micro adjustment. Tee out the arms, find warrior two. Little to no weight in the back hand, reverse your warrior. Side body stretch. So think about pulling your rib cage up and out of this hip crease as you reach back towards the back foot. Notice if you start to spin the chest up and create the back bend. Try to keep your top shoulder stacked over the bottom shoulder. If you feel any strain in the low back, I recommend looking down at the back foot instead and see if that helps. We'll slowly rise, tee out the arms, bringing the hands to the hips, straighten the front leg, rotate the toes to point forward. Level out the stance if you need to, sway the hips from side to side, just take a little movement that feels good, maybe a little dance, and then when you're ready, let's come back to our horse, sit it low. All right, this time I'm gonna teach you a different arm variation in your reverse warrior. Set up your foundation first, keeping the back knee where it is. We'll lengthen the front leg. Find those micro adjustments if you need it. Press down into the feet, finding the pada bandha or the foot lock. When you are ready, tee out the arms. Gaze over the front middle finger. Now notice as you gaze forward, if the torso starts to follow, notice if that front hip is starting to hinge forward and point towards the knee. So although you're pressing your back knee towards the pinky edge of the foot, we don't want to press so much that we come out of alignment in the pelvis, so you still want to keep the hips squared. Now, if you would like more lumbar support here, I recommend a half bind. You're gonna bend your back elbow and place the forearm on the low back. Maybe you even reach for the hip crease if you have that mobility or you want a little bit more openness in your shoulder. Otherwise, just releasing the back of the hand to the back of the hip is just fine. Flip the palm up and begin to reach towards your back foot. Now remember, if you start to feel this in the back, meaning you're spinning the chest up, reset, try to square your shoulders over the hips and then reach the hand behind you. Gaze can be down if that feels better on the low back. It can be forward or it can be up if that feels okay on your neck. Shoulder stacked over shoulder, everything from our hips up or pointed forward. Slowly begin to rise, come out of the pose, straighten the back leg, rotate the toes to point forward, bring your hands to your hips, and slowly begin to toe heel the feet together to touch. So a couple ways that you can get into your warrior two. Just be really mindful of your foundation first. That's how we're setting up the pose. One thing I did forget to mention is the alignment of your feet. So you'll hear your teachers say a lot. Your heel should be in line with the back heel or the arch of the foot. And then that pada bandha or foot lock is that press of the big toe ball mound, the pinky toe ball mound, and the heel pressing into the ground. As you move from warrior two to extended side or reverse warrior, you just want to keep the weight even in the legs so that your legs are quiet and you're just moving through the side bodies, the lateral flexion, as you start to find those variations. I hope that was helpful. Stay tuned for a live class tomorrow, incorporating everything that we have talked about during this 6-day challenge. And I will see ya on your mats on Sunday. Thanks, guys.